Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, October 20th, 2021. Senate Republicans blocking a Democratic voting rights bill for the second time this year, defeating an attempt to bring the bill up for debate and amendments. Another day of intense negotiations among Senate and House Democratic factions trying to reach a deal on the large social spending and climate change program package, anticipated to land in the $2 trillion range, as Democratic Senator Joe Manchin squashes a report that he will switch parties if he doesn't get what he wants in the budget talks, using some strong and colorful language in doing so. White House COVID-19 response coordinator laying out extensive plans for parents to get their children ages 5 to 11 vaccinated once the federal approval comes from the FDA and CDC that's expected in a few weeks. And he's promising the rollout for kids' vaccines will be a lot smoother than the one for adults a year ago. And former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, nominated for U.S. Ambassador to Japan, defending his handling of the police shooting death of Laquan McDonald 7 years ago, as some Democratic members of Congress calling on the Senate not to approve his nomination over his handling of this case. We begin with the Senate. C-SPAN's Capitol Hill producer Craig Kaplan tweeting, 49-51. Republicans block the Senate from moving forward on Democrats' voting rights bill, Freedom to Vote Act. The vote was announced by Vice President Kamala Harris, the president of the Senate. 60 votes were needed. Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, changed his vote from yes to no to allow for another vote to take place. The rest of the vote was party line. Ahead of the vote, speaking in support of the bill, Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, a Democrat and chair of the Rules and Administration Committee.
What is this Freedom to Vote Act about? It is about minimum standards for voting. You know, it's 15 days early voting. My state goes up over 40 days. That's not what we put in this bill. We put minimum standards in this bill, ensuring voters have access to at least 2 weeks of early voting. Voters so they can cast their mail-in ballot without an excuse, something people were able to use as a way to safely vote in the middle of a public health crisis. And they did it in record numbers in the middle of a crisis because they believed in our democracy, no matter which way they voted. Why would we take away that right from them now? Well, you are seeing a curtailing of that right in many states across this country. It counters partisan interference in election administration, makes sure that these super PACs and issue advocacy groups that hide behind veils have to show who's giving them the money, prohibits partisan gerrymandering. And then we listen to Secretary of States across the country, Democrats and Republicans. We listen to our colleague, Senator Manchin, who proudly has his name on this bill. So what did we do? We made changes to this bill. It provides flexibility for small and vote-by-mail jurisdictions on early voting. It makes it easier to implement automatic voting registration. It creates a new flexible source of federal funding to help our states. It ensures election officials can use best practices for maintaining accurate and up-to-date voter rolls. It is important to recognize that the Freedom to Vote Act is the first piece of voting rights legislation this Congress to come to the Senate floor with the support of all 50 Senate Democrats. Now, our Republican colleagues may not agree with everything in this bill. Okay, then don't be scared. Don't hide behind your desk. Don't deny us the right to simply debate this bill. Our leader, Senator Schumer, has made it very clear. We are open to amendments on this bill. We welcome your amendments. We're not putting a limit on amendments.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat, chair of the Rules and Administration Committee on the Senate floor ahead of today's vote. Speaking in opposition, the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell.
Later today, the Democratic leader will have the Senate vote on the latest iteration of his party's election takeover scheme. Frankly, I've just about lost count of how many times our Democratic colleagues have tried to truss up the same takeover with new trappings. For multiple years running, Washington Democrats have offered a rotating merry-go-round of rationales to explain why they need to federalize voting laws and take over all of American elections themselves. But every time they try this stick in the Senate, it falls flat. Today will be no exception. The latest umpteenth iteration is only a compromise in the sense that the left and the far left argued among themselves about exactly how much power to grab and in which areas. This latest bill still subjects popular common sense election integrity protections like voter ID to the whims of federal bureaucrats. It still sends government money to political campaigns. Government money, taxpayers' money to political campaigns. For goodness sake, it still puts Washington in the middle of states' redistricting decisions, and on and on. The same rotten core is all still there.
The Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky. Again, the vote today to move ahead on this latest version of the voting rights bill failed party line vote. Washington Post writing the Democrats' ability to make some progress on this issue is, quote, wholly dependent on the willingness of key Democratic senators to change their views on modifying the Senate's filibuster rules. And Wednesday vote is meant to, in part, to demonstrate the depth of the Republican opposition to one of those senators, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who played a leading role in crafting a narrower alternative to the sprawling bill that Senate Republicans blocked in June. Now to the budget reconciliation social spending bill negotiations following Tuesday's meetings at the White House with the president and a group of House progressive Democrats and then a group of House moderate Democrats and the two pivotal moderate Senate Democrats, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. The House Democratic Caucus today holding a closed-door meeting, and ahead of that, walking in, speaking to reporters, Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
I was wondering what you think about the current top-line number being $1.9 trillion that's being floated.
There isn't a top-line number yet. I mean, we're still putting together all the different pieces of it, and it could be anywhere between 1.9, 2.2, 2 trillion. I mean, there just isn't a top-line number because it comes out of all the programs. So we're still agreeing on all the programs, and so if I had to guess, it'd be somewhere around 2 to 2.2 is my guess.
We're reporting that it is 1.9 though, 1.75 to 1.9.
You can report that, but it just depends on what programs are in there.
Does that hinge still on all this issue of the the length of certain programs? Obviously, you whittled that down.
Yeah, to some extent, and also, we still don't have agreement from the parliamentarian on immigration, so that is something that absolutely would be included. So let's just, it's based on the programs. It's not that we don't know the top line number yet.
What do you think about the fact that community college, free tuition community college is stripped out, the child tax credit is now down to 1 year, like these sort of provisions that have been stripped from the plan that you all fought for?
Well, the 5 priorities that we fought for, which just to remind everybody, is the care economy. That included child care, pre-K, paid leave, and home and community-based care, all of which are in there. It included action on climate. We're still trying to get our arms around exactly what that will be, but it'll be a significant investment in climate. It included housing. There will be a significant investment in housing. It included Medicare expansion, dental, vision, and hearing. That is still on the table. We're still waiting on the prescription drug pricing piece because we haven't gotten to the revenue side yet. And it included immigration. So every single one of our 5 priorities is in there. Now, there were other things we fought for that weren't on our top 5 list that we would have loved to see in there, like community college. I was a huge fan of that. I have the 4-year and 2-year free college bill, College for All. And the president said he's very supportive of that, and he still wants to try and get it done. It was obviously the First Lady's priority as well, but I think I would love to have it in if we had a bigger package. But
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, speaking with reporters before the House Democratic Caucus meeting Wednesday morning. After that meeting, the caucus chair, Hakeem Jeffries of New York State, held a news conference and got questions about the budget bill negotiations.
Is there enough trust that you feel has been built up on this social spending package that if there's a framework by the end of the week, there could be a move to vote on the bipartisan bill? And the second question is if you're still on an end-of-the-month timeline, especially given that the White House yesterday said they're not.
This is President Joe Biden's agenda. The White House has indicated that they're not on a timeline. We're not on a timeline. We're just working to arrive at the consensus that is clearly moving in an incredibly positive direction to accomplish all of the policy objectives that are necessary to deliver real relief to everyday Americans, not just in this context of the pandemic moment, but as part of the effort to create a more inclusive society where that basic American contract, when you work hard and play by the rules, you should be able to provide a comfortable living for yourself and for your family and retire with grace and dignity. That's what's driving the agenda that is in front of us. And as the administration has consistently said, there is no hard timeline. We're just working to get this done, and we will.
And on the reconciliation piece, if there's a framework, if you feel that there's enough trust to move forward with the bill?
That relates to a timeline question that the White House, has said at the end of the day. Both of these bills are moving forward. They're moving forward in a positive direction. They're on a parallel track, and we look forward to getting them over the finish line.
House Democratic Caucus Chair Hakeem Jeffries with reporters. And with more on the budget reconciliation talks, we're joined by Alex Bolton, congressional reporter with The Hill. Thanks for doing this. Where are things with these negotiations?
Well, Democrats say they are getting closer to a deal, and they have a goal of reaching agreement on a framework by the end of the week. The talks right now are being spearheaded between Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Bernie Sanders of Vermont, and it seems right now they are mostly focused on the proposal to expand Medicare and to give Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices. Those are the top priorities of Sanders, who is the Budget Committee chairman. Other proposals that the White House, I think, is taking the lead on and have been negotiated downward include Pell Grants being used to supplement the cost of college education instead of free community college. That is something that the free community college, it looks like it has dropped out of the proposal. They are talking about a national paid family leave program of 4 weeks rather than 12 weeks initially. There are other proposals that have shrunk, for instance, home health care for the elderly and disabled. Initially, that was a $400 billion proposal. Now that's likely to be less than $250 billion. So as the top line of this package has come down from $3.5 trillion to now it looks like something in between $1.75 trillion and $1.9 trillion, programs are falling out, and some of the programs that are in there are shrinking. There still is a lot of money for pre-kindergarten and expanded child care. And so those are, I think, some of the president's top priorities. Climate change, there are a variety of tax incentives expected to be included. However, one of the core elements, the Clean Electricity Performance Program, that is out. There was a brief discussion about including a carbon tax to supplement the clean energy tax incentives. That has been dismissed by Joe Manchin. So we are moving towards a deal, but we're doing so as the package becomes smaller and proposals will wind up spending less. There was a decision, I think, made by the White House and Democratic leaders that they opted to keep as many proposals on the table but spend less on them, and that is to keep progressives in the House and Senate happy. There are some Democrats who have argued for doing fewer things and doing them for a longer period of time, but instead it looks like what we're moving towards is a greater number of programs at lower dollar amounts, but even so, some are still falling by the wayside. And I think Democrats have realized that the time is running out. There's a special election coming up. There's the gubernatorial election coming up in Virginia, and that could be a litmus test or a referendum on Biden's first year in office. And I think folks are racing to get at least a deal on a framework before then.
Congressman Jeffries, in the clip we just played, was asked, if you get a framework this week, can you be voting by next week? He emphasized there's no deadline, there's no timeline. But you mentioned politically there's could be an end on this. Procedurally, is there any time frame that they've got to abide by?
No, there isn't. But the you have to keep in mind that the broader reconciliation package, which is the human infrastructure spending package, that is linked to the $1 trillion hard infrastructure package. And as you know, there was a 30-day extension for highway programs that expires at the end of this month. So I think the goal is to get an agreement on a framework for the reconciliation package in hopes that that will reassure progressives to then let the $1 trillion hard infrastructure bill pass the House, make it to President Biden's desk for a signature. And they want to do that by the October 31st deadline because that is when the highway programs are going to expire. So if you don't make that deadline, you'd have to do another short-term extension. So that is a that is something putting some pressure on these talks, but it's not a hard and fast deadline because you can always do another month-long extension. But that sort of it looks like you are governing a piecemeal, and it's better to do as few short-term extensions as possible.
We're talking with Alex Bolton, reporter with The Hill. Senator Joe Manchin is in the middle of these negotiations as a key moderate. You have a sort of a related story today. His response to another report that he was considering switching parties. What did you find?
Well, there was a report that came out around lunchtime from Mother Jones saying that Manchin is actively considering dropping out of the Democratic Party and that he would first drop off Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's leadership team and then change his affiliation from D to independent, or basically drop out of the Democratic Party. And that he would do that if the Democrats insisted on sticking to their $3.5 trillion spending goal. Manchin was very adamant after attending a meeting of Senate Democratic chairman that the story was false. He said that it's bull crap, essentially, and that with a capital B, he said, I have no control over rumors, and he basically slapped it down. And so I think one of the things that's kind of curious about the report is its timing, that it's coming out that he's contemplating a party switch when really right now the party's moving towards him. I mean, his top line number was $1.5 trillion for the reconciliation package. Democrats acknowledge that the $3.5 trillion number that was discussed earlier this year is out the window, and that it's going to be something much closer to where Manchin is. So he seems to be winning the debate as far as that goes. And also, Manchin told colleagues in a meeting Tuesday that he will be negotiating with Bernie Sanders this week in hopes of making real substantial progress towards a framework agreement by week's end or by month's end. So Manchin seems to be he seems to be winning the argument right now within his party, to be frank. And so it's not really a good time for him to drop out. And so I think that's maybe why he was so exasperated and so angry in denying this report. He said it's not true at all. Rumors of Manchin party switching come up every few years, and he discussed it as recently as July with Fox News, and he said that he never considered dropping out of the Democratic Party. So this is a rumor that pops up every now and then, and Manchin really slapped it down with authority this afternoon.
Alex Bolton covers Congress for The Hill. Find his stories at thehill.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On Wall Street today, the Dow was up 152, NASDAQ down 7, S&P up 16. The House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer says the full House will vote on Thursday on whether to hold Steve Bannon, former advisor to former President Donald Trump, in contempt of Congress for refusing to cooperate with the Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. On Tuesday night, there was a unanimous vote of the committee to recommend the contempt citation. Today, it was before the House Rules Committee, which will set the rules for floor debate on Thursday. The vice chair of the committee, Liz Cheney, Republican from Wyoming, appearing as a witness.
Mr. Bannon has written to us suggesting that he's relying on the fact that President Trump wishes to assert executive privilege for his communications with Bannon regarding the planning for January 6th. We do not believe any such privilege claims are appropriate. And even if such privilege existed, it is still not absolute or unqualified. We are confident that we will prevail on these privilege issues. But there is a more important and more fundamental point here. The vast majority of what we need from Mr. Bannon is not even conceivably subject to an executive privilege claim. Mr. Bannon is using privilege as a pretext for not appearing at all and for producing absolutely no documents of any kind. That puts this institution's authority at significant risk, not just here and now, but in all future investigations. Criminal contempt is the appropriate response in these circumstances. At this moment, it is not just the institution of Congress's authority that is at stake. The potential harm to the foundation of our republic is far more significant. In the past week, President Trump has openly urged millions of Republican voters not to vote in 2022 or 2024. He's urging them to abandon our democratic system, based on what every one of us knows are false claims about systemic fraud and Dominion voting machines. Let me address my Republican colleagues specifically. I've heard from a number of my colleagues in the last several days who say they, quote, just don't want this target on their back. They're just trying to keep their heads down. They don't want to anger Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader, who has been especially active in attempting to block the investigation of events of January 6th, despite the fact that he clearly called for such a commission the week after the attack. I ask each one of you to step back from the brink. I urge you to do what you know is right, to think of the long arc of history. We are told that it bends towards justice, but it does so only because of the actions of men and women in positions of public trust.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney, Republican from Wyoming, testifying before the House Rules Committee. That committee will be setting the rules for floor debate on the contempt citation against Steve Bannon. That's debate scheduled in the House floor on Thursday. Congresswoman Cheney and the other Republican on the Select Committee, Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, were appointed by Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This after House Republicans refused to appoint committee members, and that after Speaker Pelosi rejected two of the members that they wanted to put on the committee. So how might other House Republicans vote on Thursday when the contempt citation, the resolution, comes before the House? That question today to the House Republican whip, Steve Scalise.
The full House is going to consider contempt of Congress for Mr. Bannon. How important is it for congressional subpoenas to be upheld?
Well, if you look at what they're doing, this whole commission started off as a very partisan exercise. They really didn't want to get a true working relationship, and in fact, Pelosi rejected some of McCarthy's picks to the commission, which has never happened before. So they're not trying to get at the truth. They want to just continue trying to create distractions so they don't have to talk about the crises that they've created on every level. They don't want to deal with inflation. They want to hope it goes away, but it's not going away. In fact, it's getting worse. And ultimately, they're going to be judged on how their policies affect regular people across America. And right now, it's a devastating impact that these far-left socialist items have had on those families.
But isn't it likely that a number of Republicans could vote to hold him in contempt because it's important that congressional subpoenas hold water?
I think you're seeing most members get tired of the witch hunts and the games. Let's focus on policies that affect everyday families right now instead of these partisan witch hunts that they want to keep going on.
But would you be concerned in 2022 what that does if you all take back the majority?
Oh, well, ultimately, there ought to be oversight going on, bringing in cabinet secretaries. Why isn't Pete Buttigieg coming before committees talking about the supply chain backlog and what they've done to create this problem and what is their plan to get us out of it? Why aren't they bringing in the energy secretary and the interior secretary to talk about the shortage of energy? Look at natural gas prices going up here in America, 13-year high on natural gas prices. In Europe, it's even worse, by the way, which is a harbinger of things to come. There are things we could be doing here in America to produce more of our own energy instead of President Biden begging OPEC and Russia, which, by the way, they emit more carbon than when we produce oil here in America. We should be making more energy in America, not less. We should be having hearings and oversight on that. They don't want to have hearings and oversight on that because it'll expose their failures. The border crisis, the origins of the virus that started in the Wuhan lab, most likely by all experts that have been willing to speak about it publicly, what Mike McCall has done with the China task force to expose so many threats that are being posed by China. They won't have a hearing on any of that. And frankly, I think Americans are fed up with it.
Congressman Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana, the minority whip, news conference on Capitol Hill. Following the full House vote on the contempt citation against Steve Bannon on Thursday, writes CNN, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi expected to certify the report to the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. Under law, the certification then requires the U.S. Attorney to bring the matter before the grand jury for its action, but the Justice Department will also make its own determination for prosecution. CNN adding this, as severe as a criminal contempt referral sounds, the House's choice to use the Justice Department may be more of a warning shot than a solution. Holding Bannon in criminal contempt through a prosecution could take years. And historically, criminal contempt cases have been derailed by appeals and acquittals. Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, tweeting today, I'm joining Senator Ron Johnson, Senator Rob Portman, both Republicans, in a roundtable with experts, law enforcement, and families to hear their firsthand experience dealing with Joe Biden's raging, dangerous crisis at our southern border. Roundtable also included those former federal officials. At one point, Senator Scott and Mark Morgan, former acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, said the border situation is so bad that the current Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, should resign.
How many of you that have dealt with Mayorkas believe he's lied to the American people?
Say that again, sir.
How many of you believe that he has lied to the American people? Okay. He has to resign.
So just for that's six of the people that know him.
Okay.
That's all.
He has to resign. You cannot. I asked him when I interviewed him, I said, are you going to comply with the law? He said, absolutely. Are you going to provide me all the information I want for oversight? I'm a Homeland Security. Absolutely. He came into the committee that we were in 3 weeks ago and completely lied. He's a lie to the American people. The guy has to resign.
Yes, sir. And Senator Johnson, I completely agree, sir. Senator Johnson, I watched your questioning. You asked him 3 simple questions. How many have removed? How many have been released? How many are detained? As the Secretary of Homeland Security, you didn't even get into the details about demographics, how many unaccompanied minors, how many families, how many single adults, right? As the Secretary, look, as the Commissioner, I know he has that data because we helped create those documents. I mean, the chief here used to bust on me all the time and said, you know, Commissioner, stop looking at data every day, right? Because I was calling him every single day just about the data. This Secretary had this data. And so he either directly lied to you when he said he didn't have it, or he intentionally stuck his head in the sand. Both are unconscionable, and both he should be removed.
Mark Morgan was acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection under President Trump, taking part in today's roundtable discussion, referencing an earlier hearing. Questions from Senator Rick Scott. Washington Post reports that unpublished Customs and Border Protection data obtained by the Post showing U.S. authorities detained more than 1.7 million migrants along the Mexico border during the 2021 fiscal year that ended in September, and arrests by Border Patrol soared to the highest levels ever recorded. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Get C-SPAN on the go. Watch the day's biggest political events live or on demand anytime, anywhere on our new mobile video app, C-SPAN Now. Access top highlights, listen to C-SPAN Radio, and discover new podcasts, all for free. Download C-SPAN Now today.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now app and wherever you get your podcasts. Associated Press reporting that children ages 5 to 11 will soon be able to get a COVID-19 shot at their pediatrician's office, local pharmacy, and potentially even their school, White House saying, as it detailed plans for the expected authorization of the Pfizer shot for elementary school youngsters in a matter of weeks. Jeff Zients is the White House COVID-19 response coordinator. He began today's virtual briefing.
We expect the FDA and CDC's decision on Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for children ages 5 through 11 in the next couple of weeks. We know millions of parents have been waiting for a COVID-19 vaccine for kids in this age group. And should the FDA and CDC authorize the vaccine, we will be ready to get shots in arms. Kids have different needs than adults, and our operational planning is geared to meet those specific needs, including by offering vaccinations in settings that parents and kids are familiar with and trust. At the same time, we're incorporating best practices, and applying lessons we have learned across the past 9 months. Over the past several weeks, we've been working closely with governors, pediatricians, pharmacies, community health centers, rural health centers, and other vaccine providers to prepare for this moment. Together, we're completing the operational planning to ensure vaccinations for kids ages 5 through 11 are available, easy, and convenient. And thanks to President Biden and the resources of the American Rescue Plan, states, tribes, territories will all continue to receive unprecedented levels of federal support, including full reimbursement from the federal government for vaccination operations and outreach programs. I want to highlight progress across a few key operational fronts. First, on supply. We have secured vaccine supply to vaccinate every child ages 5 through 11. And as soon as the vaccine is authorized by the FDA, we will begin shipping millions of doses nationwide. States, tribes, and territories are working to ensure that doses continue to be distributed efficiently and equitably across their jurisdictions. And importantly, we worked with Pfizer to modify the packaging of the pediatric doses to make it easier for pediatricians, family doctors, and other providers to provide vaccines to children. And these vaccine doses will be shipped with all the supplies needed to vaccinate kids, including smaller needles. Next, on getting kids vaccinated. We know parents rely on a range of healthcare providers to meet their children's needs, including pediatricians, family doctors, children's hospitals, pharmacies, and community and rural health centers. We're doing the work to ensure parents will be able to get their kids, ages 5 through 11, vaccinated with these trusted providers. We've already enrolled more than 25,000 pediatricians, family doctors, and other primary care providers to administer vaccines, and we're working with states and localities to enroll more. As part of the federal pharmacy program, tens of thousands of local pharmacies across the country will offer vaccinations for kids. And hundreds of community health centers and rural health centers, which serve millions of kids ages 5 through 11 across the country, predominantly in underserved communities, will be ready to vaccinate kids. We're also collaborating with the Children's Hospital Association to work with more than 100 children's hospitals across the country to stand up vaccination sites in their communities. Children's hospitals will partner with local community and faith-based organizations to host vaccination events, including in the evenings and on weekends, so parents can get their kids vaccinated at hours that work for them. And to make vaccinating kids even more convenient, we'll work with state and local education leaders to bring vaccination clinics directly to schools, including by matching pharmacies and other vaccine providers with school districts to set up on-site clinics.
The White House COVID-19 response coordinator Jeff Zients, part of today's White House briefing. And today also, the Food and Drug Administration authorizing booster shots for both Johnson & Johnson and Moderna's COVID vaccines, a critical step in getting the extra doses to tens of millions of people. This now goes to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and its advisory committee, which is scheduled a meeting Thursday to discuss the booster data. If the committee issues a recommendation, the CDC Director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, will be the next one to sign off, and then the booster shots can be given. From Bloomberg News, President Joe Biden's pick to be ambassador to China drew sharp lines with Beijing over its aggressive actions in the Indo-Pacific, but said American strength and alliances give the U.S. key advantages in the relationship between the world's two largest economies. Nicholas Burns, a longtime diplomat who previously served as U.S. ambassador to NATO and Greece, saying China has been the aggressor in its relationship with its neighbors. Here's part of his opening statement before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Beijing has been an aggressor against India along their long Himalayan border, against Vietnam, the Philippines, and others in the South China Sea, against Japan in the East China Sea, and Beijing has launched an intimidation campaign against Australia and even more recently Lithuania. The PRC's genocide in Xinjiang, its abuses in Tibet, its smothering of Hong Kong's autonomy and freedoms, and its bullying of Taiwan are unjust and must stop. Beijing's recent actions against Taiwan are especially objectionable. The United States is right to continue its one China policy, but we're also right to support the peaceful resolution of disputes in this region and to oppose unilateral actions that undermine the status quo and undermine the stability of the region. The administration and Congress, together on a bipartisan basis, should help Taiwan to maintain a self-defense capability, and that's the language of the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979. The Biden administration as well is surely right to seek effective channels of communication with Beijing to manage this competition responsibly, to diminish the risk of an accidental conflict, and above all, to maintain the peace. The United States has to proceed from a position of strength and pursue intense diplomacy in all these matters. Beijing proclaims that the East is rising and the West is in decline. I'm confident in our own country. I believe that together with our allies and our partners, we can prove them wrong.
Nicholas Burns, longtime State Department official, nominated to be U.S. Ambassador to China. His confirmation hearing today before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Another nominee at today's hearing, Rahm Emanuel, for U.S. Ambassador to Japan. Rahm Emanuel is a former mayor of Chicago. The Chicago Tribune writes that Emanuel both defended and expressed regret over his handling of the police shooting of Laquan McDonald under questioning from senators. Foreign Relations Committee Chair Bob Menendez noting the hearing fell on the 7th anniversary of McDonald's murder at the hands of a Chicago police officer, offering Emanuel an opportunity to address the defining event of his tenure as mayor. The article goes on, while Emanuel said he should have done more to push reforms, he did not specify what he would have changed about how he responded to the McDonald shooting. Here's part of the questioning. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, and Rahm Emanuel.
My understanding is that the mother of Laquan McDonald learned about the nature of the shooting when she was called by the funeral house, who said to her, "Did you realize your son was shot multiple times, that his body is riddled with bullets?" She didn't know, apparently, at that point. That information had not been shared with her. And then her attorney subpoenaed records in November of 2014. And when the attorney subpoenaed records, did that trigger the conversation that filled you in? I know you've said you never saw the videos, but filled you in on the fact that this was an unusual case where a child had been shot 16 times.
As I said in an answer to Chairman Menendez, there is an investigation going on by 3 entities, the U.S. Attorney, the State's Attorney, IPRA. They were the ones dealing with this, and as I believe, you don't want a politician to make a unilateral decision while those investigations are going on, because it would violate a sacrosanct protocol and principle of ensuring that nothing is out prior to the investigation being wrapped up.
Yes, Mayor, but that wasn't my question. My question was, when her attorneys sought the evidence from the city, is that when you learned about the nature of what had happened from the city attorney or from the police or so forth?
As I said, when the video became public is when I learned what happened and the consequence and what happened that night.
Okay, so in December, the family viewed the tapes, and the city required that they enter into a non-disclose agreement. That's a pretty significant decision. You were saying you had no idea of the circumstances of the shooting. No one had told you the child had been shot 16 times, or that the child was lying on the ground, or that a revolver was reloaded. You had no idea in December when the family reviewed the tapes?
Senator, is that situation, the family approached the city about a settlement. An NDA is a standard practice at that time, and also the public information, as you know, when the city council is asked to work with the family, come up with the resources for the compensation. All the members of the city council heard that, and it passed 50-0. So that was the kind of description that was in the public domain when it was voted on.
Yes, of course, I didn't ask about the NDA. I asked if at that point you were briefed on the details of the shooting.
The details were in the public domain when the Corporation Council briefed the alderman.
So in February and March, the city reached out proactively. Please, Chairman, can I finish a few questions here?
I don't know about a few questions, but this has been explored, and it's now almost 2 minutes over, so I'll give you another minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll submit questions for the record so that you can address these things. But I think that in this time of national reckoning with the challenge of Black Lives Matter, when aldermen and state representatives and state senators say this was an issue, that there was close cooperation during your time as mayor between the mayor's office to essentially discourage the release of information and to not develop significant reforms, which I know that you have a story to tell about the reforms, and I'll submit questions to record so you can tell that story. I think it's important for this committee to actually weigh this.
Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, questioning Rahm Emanuel, former Chicago mayor, Democrat, nominated now for U.S. Ambassador to Japan, today's Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. Congresswoman Cori Bush, Democrat from Missouri, tweeting, Rahm Emanuel should be disqualified from any public office for covering up the murder of Laquan McDonald. The Senate needs to do the right thing and block his nomination. This from USAToday.com. Paris Hilton is reflecting on her own traumatic experiences in order to advocate for reform for youth in congregate care. The entrepreneur and socialite, 40 years old, has previously spoken about her verbal, emotional, and physical abuse she says she endured at Provo Canyon School, a Utah boarding school for troubled teens. Now she's urging for federal-level reform. Paris Hilton joining members of conference at a news conference on Capitol Hill.
My parents were promised that tough love would fix me and that sending me across the country was the only way. I was sent to 4 facilities of almost a 2-year period, and my experience at each one haunts me to this day. I was strangled, slapped across the face, watched in the shower by male staff, called vulgar names, forced to take medication without a diagnosis, not given a proper education, thrown into solitary confinement in a room covered in scratch marks and smeared in blood, and so much more. At Provo Canyon School in Utah, I was given clothes with a number on the tag. I was no longer me. I was only number 127. I was forced to stay indoors for 11 months straight. No sunlight, no fresh air. These were considered privileges. Children were regularly hit, thrown into walls, and even sexually abused at Provo. I wish I could tell you that what I experienced to witness was unique or even rare, but sadly it's not. Every day in America, children in congregate care settings are being physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. Children are even dying at the hands of those responsible for their care. Just last year at Lakeside Academy in Michigan, 16-year-old Cornelius Frederick was restrained by 7 staff members for over 12 minutes and later died from suffocation. Why? Because he threw a sandwich in the cafeteria, and for this, he died. The multi-billion-dollar troubled teen industry has been able to mislead parents, school districts, child welfare agencies, and juvenile justice systems for decades. The reason is a system-wide lack of transparency and accountability. It's clear that the state-by-state patchwork of limited, weak oversight and inconsistent licensing requirements is not working. Federal law and funding are desperately needed to bring real reform and true accountability to congregate care in America.
Paris Hilton outside the U.S. Capitol building, former TV star and online star, telling her story, joined by other survivors of institutional abuse and members of Congress as well, including Ro Khanna, Rosa DeLauro, Adam Schiff, and Senator Jeff Merkley was there as well. The reform bill being introduced is titled Accountability for Congregate Care Act. This story from The Independent in Great Britain, Prime Minister Boris Johnson committing to a House of Commons vote on the online safety bill before Christmas, following a question by Labour leader Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions. Sir Keir citing examples of violent material not being removed by social media companies, including instances of abuse on the app Telegram posted while MPs gave tributes to murdered MP Sir David Amess on Monday. Here's part of today's exchange.
Telegram has been described as the app of choice for extremists. And Mr. Speaker, if you can believe it, if the House can believe it, as we were paying tribute to Sir David on Monday, Telegram users could access videos of murders and violent threats against politicians, the LGBT community, women and Jews, as we were paying our respects. Some of these posts are illegal, all of them are harmful, and Hope Not Hate and the Board of Deputies have said that Telegram has, in their words, facilitated and nurtured a subculture that cheerleads for terrorists. Tough sanctions are clearly needed. Yet, under the government's current proposals, directors of platforms failing to crack down on extremism would still not face criminal sanctions. Why is that?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is this government that brought forward an online harms bill, Mr. Speaker, and he's heard what I've said. He's heard what I've said about the second reading before Christmas, and in the collegiate spirit in which he announced he began his questioning, I can tell him that we will continue to look at ways in which we can toughen up those provisions and to come down hard on those who irresponsibly allow dangerous and extremist content to permeate the internet. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that he's taking this new tough line, and I very much hope that he will get the rest of his party in the lobbies with us to join him.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, leader of the Conservative Party, questioned by the opposition leader, main opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer. Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons in London today. The Member of Parliament David Amess was stabbed and killed on Friday at a constituent event held in a church. One suspect has been arrested. Thanks for listening to Washington Today, and for more top Washington stories, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, at c-span.org/connect. Hope you have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day, we take your calls live on the air on the news of the day, and we discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Thursday morning, we'll discuss the future of President Biden's Build Back Better agenda and upcoming deadlines on the debt ceiling and federal spending with North Carolina Democratic Congressman David Price, and then New York Republican Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis. And former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen talks about the future of NATO and global security. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Thursday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our new mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, texts, and tweets.